Hoka has been falling behind the competition when it comes to their carbon-plated racers. But when we started to see Hoka athletes running and running well in a new prototype, it gave the Hoka faithful some hope. And now, almost a year since we first saw those protos, it's finally here. This is the Hoka Rocket X2. Yo, what's going on everybody? My name is Kofuzi and today I want to talk to you guys about the Rocket X2. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a shoe that Hoka sent to me for the purpose of review. And in addition to that, my initial testing of this shoe was at a race down in Miami where Hoka brought a bunch of media and other influencers and YouTubers. So I didn't have to pay for any of that trip or for these shoes. However, no one is paying me to make this video or to use these shoes, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Hoka Rocket X2. And for me, the biggest news about this is that this shoe finally brings Hoka away from compression molded EVA in their racing shoes. They've got a peba foam in here and there's two layers of it, one above and one below the carbon fiber plate that you could see in this little window down here through this cutout in the midsole. And they're calling it a spoon-shaped carbon fiber plate, and the positioning of it and kind of the angle of it, I think it tracks this crease. I think this is the separation between the two layers of the foam. And together, the foam and the carbon fiber plate result in 36 millimeters of stack height in the heel and 31 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot, resulting in a 5 millimeter drop. Turning to the outsole, we've got strategically placed rubber with a couple of exposed areas of foam as well. To me, this rubber felt like it was kind of a harder compound, which I think will help in durability of the outsole, but I did find it in certain of the kind of wettest aid stations that I ran through during the Miami Half Marathon. I found that it was a little bit on the slippery side. Moving to the upper, we've got this kind of mono mesh type of material. It looks kind of like a ripstop material on the outside, and on the inside there is an internal midfoot cage that keeps you nice and locked in to the shoe. Around the back of the heel, there isn't a ton of structure at all. It's very floppy, but we do have a couple of bumper pads along the sides and towards the back of the heel to help with comfort and a little bit with fit. Now, in terms of weights, Hoka did something a little bit weird and is reporting weights not using standard reference sizes. So for a men's size 10, this shoe comes in at 8.3 ounces and 236 grams. And for the women, they're using a women's size 8, and that's 6.7 ounces and 190 grams. Now, it's not super scientific because I didn't weigh it before I ran in the shoe, and I've since run in the shoe. I've sweated a bunch in the shoe. I've gotten it dirty. But my size 9 for US men comes in just under 8 ounces at 7.9 ounces, or 224 grams. So now with those specs out of the way, let's talk about what it was like to actually run in the shoe. And the first thing I'll say is this is the shoe that Hoka has needed for a while. I feel like this is a legit carbon plated racer. Not to say that they didn't have other good shoes before, not to say that they didn't have other good carbon plated shoes before, but I always felt like these weren't the same as what like the rest of the competition is making and what the rest of us seem to love to be racing in. I feel like Hoka is going to be catching up with this shoe. I do like the feel of the peba. I think it makes a huge difference in terms of the way that this shoe performs. And I like the way that they're using the carbon now. And it seems like they're using the carbon not only for that stability that carbon can provide, but also for that kind of like springy propulsive effect that we all are coming to expect from that top tier of racing shoes. Now, I will say it's not like a super squishy foam. peba can mean a lot of different things depending on kind of like how it's made and how it's put together and where the carbon is in position in terms of like higher or lower in the stack height. And I'll say that the way that the peba feels in this shoe, it feels a little bit denser than one might instantly think when they're thinking of like a peba or a Pebax powered shoe. But I also feel like this shoe really gave a lot back to me, especially when I'm trying to pick up the pace during a half marathon race. It absorbs impact well, and there's plenty of nice carbon springiness that I'm finally getting from the carbon fiber plate. I also feel like it's a relatively stable shoe, even late into the race, and I extended my race day. I was setting up for the half, but I wanted to get a little bit more mileage on the day, so I made it a 17-mile day by running from the hotel to the race, adding another 4 miles onto the day. But even late in the race for me at mile 16 and mile 17, I felt like the shoe was still very easy to run in. I felt like I was still getting very stable landings. And as far as the fit goes on the upper, I feel like they really nailed a good fit in this shoe. I think that the internal midfoot cage does a good job of keeping you locked in. I do like the floppiness of this heel back here. The bumper pads do just enough to make sure I'm still feeling locked in. So everything's feeling nice and secure. And I do feel like I have plenty of room in the toe box, so nothing's getting crunched or smushed. No chafing, no bleeding happening in this shoe. All feels very good. I feel like there's still plenty of room in the toe box without it feeling sloppy by any means. I think the one and only one downside I have in terms of the fit and performance of this upper is that this kind of like ripstop material doesn't really breathe all that well and doesn't let a lot of moisture out. So yes, it was a very hot day and I was just pouring cups of water on myself throughout the race. And a lot of that was kind of getting into the shoe, but I also felt like it was kind of staying in the shoe a really long time, and my like feet and socks just kind of felt very wet by the time I finished the race. Now, on a day that was as hot as it was in Miami for that half marathon, it's going to be a day where you have wet feet at the end of the race, but I just felt like it could have done a little bit better in terms of how I would like a racing caliber shoe to perform. All right, now let's get to the summary portion of the video where I talk about what the shoe is best for, some other shoes you might want to look at, how to pair it with some other shoes to make a rotation, and my recommendations in terms of the buying guide. So first, what is this shoe best for? I think this shoe is best for sessions. Of course, it's going to be a really great shoe to do workouts in. I feel like there's enough stack height in it where you can take it for those long runs and those marathon workouts, and your feet are going to feel good and your body's going to feel relatively protected so you can get to that next session in good condition. And the big question for me though is the Hoka racing shoe still just a session shoe, or can you use it as a racing shoe now? And I'll say that I definitely think you can race half marathons in it, probably 10Ks and 5Ks as well, because it feels like a fun, fast shoe. But because that peba is a little bit on the dense side, I'm not positive that I'd want to take this for a full marathon race. I think a lot of people are going to be able to do that, and I think they're going to have a great time with it. But I just think that for my preferences, where I love like something that just deflects a whole bunch and has a lot of squish to it, it's not going to be one of my top choices. But I do think ultimately, to answer the question definitively, it is a marathon shoe, but it's just not going to be for everyone. All right, so let's say you're thinking about this shoe. I think some other shoes that you should also consider are these. First, I'm going to talk about the Hyperion Max. Now, this is kind of a session shoe, and it kind of undercuts my argument that the Rocket X2 isn't just a speed work shoe. But I do think, in my opinion, that right now, the Hyperion Max is the best racing shoe, at least for the marathon distance, that exists in the Brooks lineup. So I feel like this is a marathon shoe, this is a marathon shoe. I feel like they both have a lot of similar characteristics in the fact that the foams are each a little bit firmer than I normally would prefer, but they also work and they just give you more back the more that you push into them, and it ends up being a very exciting ride, even though it is a little bit firmer than I normally would prefer. Now, the other shoe that I think that could work if you're looking at the Rocket X2 is the Ultra Vanish Carbon. Again, here I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of how these two shoes perform. Again, this is a shoe that's a little bit on the firmer side, but once you're putting more effort into it, you're getting more out of it, and that's what makes it exciting. That's when it's fun to run in it. And it also has a very floppy heel and a nice amount of room in the forefoot. And it's a zero drop shoe, or at least they're telling us it's a zero drop shoe. So I think it also compares nicely with the 5mm drop in the Rocket X2. So those are two other options that you can consider. But if you're gonna go with the Rocket X2, you might wanna think about some shoes that you can pair it with if you are trying to build a rotation. And I think for this one, the obvious choice, if you wanna keep it in the Hoka fam, could be either the Rincon as your daily trainer, and then you use the Rocket X2 as your racing shoe and your workout shoe. Or if you wanna have a racing shoe as the Rocket X2, then your session shoe could be the Rocket X version 1. So those are some options for you. But if you want to go outside the family, I think that a shoe that would pair really nicely could be the Adidas Adizero SL. This is a shoe with Light Strike and EVA foam and a puck of Light Strike Pro, their racing foam, in the forefoot. So you get something that's a little bit on the firmer side, but a lot of fun to run in, and a little bit on the speedier side. I feel like that firmness, that speed that's in here is going to match up nicely from a daily training to a workout and racing perspective with the Rocket X2. Now let's talk about the buying guide. This shoe comes in at a retail of $250, and I feel like that might be a little bit pricey. $225 would make me a lot happier if that were the price for this shoe, but $225, $250, that's what the racing shoes are costing these days. And I do think that this is substantially different from the other carbon plated shoes that Hoka has offered for the roads in the past. So I don't really think that this is a situation where you can look back and get last year's version on sale somewhere and kind of like get by with the differences. This is a very different shoe. So if you want to be racing in a Hoka shoe for the roads, the Rocket X2 is the way to go, and that's what I would recommend for you. So those are my thoughts on the Hoka Rocket X2. Finally getting a chance to run in it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that I missed that you want to know about, or better yet, feel free to stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube, and I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?